Hi guys, I'm Ben. I'm an alcoholic. I since I pay my taxes quarterly, I realized I just reached 13 quarters, 3 and a quarter years. So I instead of starting at the where it began, I'm actually going to start with today, and then I'll go back to where it began. So today, spanning from last night over into about 5 in the morning today, I was at my mom's house. Organizing stuff to take because it was the last night to take anything from her house before the people come in to gather everything to either go to the dump or the estate sale. She's moved to senior living. So, getting all the photographs together and saving what needed to be saved. And yeah, it was a lot of work, and it was kind of emotional. And, there's a whole liquor cabinet there. But I didn't think about drinking. I definitely thought about how after my father passed away, there was a similar situation where there was a bunch of stuff, and his um, widow didn't care to have any of it, and it was just gonna same situation. So I had kind of had to go through and decide what stuff was going to be saved for either me or my brothers or whatever, and I drank quite a bit throughout that process. Probably shouldn't have been driving after, once I had figured everything out. A whole different experience this time, and I'm super glad that because of this group and every bit of support it's given me, I'm able to be there for my mom in her new situation and be able to do this kind of thing and not have it make me break down and have to drink. So back to where it began. I was just thinking about this when I was in my first year of high school. I um, I had some friends that I had been friends with through like junior high, and I had some other acquaintances that I had known since elementary school who started smoking weed and, kind of being the bad kids. And I basically ditched my junior high school friends and went and made friends with these kids. And right away I took to weed was, our main thing. We drank a little bit, but mainly after another year or so, we got into acid, and that was kind of our like um, fun little um, experience together. So I did that a number of times, smoked a lot of weed, and I was always more so than my friends wanting to get more high, like always feeling like, oh man, I didn't take enough, or I wish we had another joint, or whatever. And I didn't really, think of it as anything weird. I just kind of felt like, I was a little bit socially, I felt like I needed something more to be social, to have fun. And it's only in hindsight that I realized that that was the early warnings of something. So I started college, and weirdly, there were a couple years when I started college that I didn't really drink, and I kind of stopped smoking weed, partly because I worked on a boat for a little while, and we couldn't really be. We got drug tested, so I couldn't smoke weed, and was working a lot. So that was actually a pretty healthy emotional time in my life, and a time when without thinking about it, I kind of got sober. Smoked a lot of cigarettes and chewed tobacco. Horrible habit. That's a boat thing, though. It's just kind of, you can't smoke in front of the passengers. So, um, especially because it's scuba diving, you don't want to be like the rescue diver smoking a cigarette. Bad look. But then I went off to college away from home, and moved to Berkeley. And I remember like the first day there, I wasn't 21 yet. maybe I was, but either way, it was pretty easy to get alcohol. And right away, I was just like, yeah, this is going to be like a fun time to drink and do the college thing. Like, I'm going to dive right into the college experience. And it wasn't long before I was, finding all the people who smoked weed and drank, and those were my friends. That's how I found my friends, was the people that I could get the most high with. Um, and of course, I was the one who would get too drunk. I was the one who would black out. I just, yeah, with alcohol, just like it had been when I was younger, I always wanted to keep drinking. I always wanted to like order that last drink that I didn't need, as the bar was closing. And I sort of justified it, this is college and this is what we do, everybody's drinking. I didn't really, put it together that other people didn't sort of treat it the same way I did. But I later I moved to Seattle to finish school, and it was a music school. And interestingly, I played. I worked with the jazz and the classical department at the school, and classical musicians almost completely, almost to a person, didn't like weed. Like they hated the way it worked with them, and jazz musicians all did. I don't know exactly what the psychology of that is, the improvisation thing, the precision of memorization of exactness, and the opposite, like creative, um in the moment, expression. I'm not sure if it's something psychological that drew them to jazz or classical music, or if it's something that developed because that's the thing that they played or whatever. But the classical musicians tended to drink, but not much, and not like in any, the jazz musicians, we would sometimes get dirty looks from our teachers for being like stoned in class. Um, and it was a little bit of a weird thing, like weed. I always loved it, and I also always hated it. It always gave me anxiety. It always caused uncomfortable physical things for me that I sort of just, I honestly, like, sometimes I would smoke some weed and then I'd have to have a drink to like physically calm myself because it was like messing with me. But I still wanted to do both of those things. I didn't think like, hey, maybe I should just not do either. Um, so yeah, I remember at one point I was at a party, and it was couple of us, that lived together. We were like jazz, and we studied with one Brazilian teacher, and made friends over that. We went to a party that was mostly classical students, and at one point I was like, hey, maybe we'll smoke some weed. And I remember they were all kind of like freaked out, that, like, wow, you guys really want to just like smoke weed at a party? And one of them asked my friend in like a worried way, like about me and my need to like be high to socialize. And I was just like, what kind of question is that? Like, of course I need to be high to socialize. Doesn't everybody? Like, this is a party. Like, what are we supposed to do? Just talk with each other? And yeah, that has always kind of been the case. I remember so many times being at a party and drinking, and then being like, I know somewhere around here there's like a room where people are smoking weed with each other, and I need to find that. Like, it's very important that that is where I am, because this whole just out here with people thing is not working for me. um it wasn't until after I finished school and I moved back to Santa Barbara. I was working a day job, and I was trying to develop a music career. Um, I started to rationalize my drinking at this time, not, anymore. I couldn't be like, oh, this is the college thing. Instead, it was about how like my musical heroes, especially because I started getting into playing country music, were a whole bunch of drunks, and it was awesome, like that was part of their mystique. It was part of what they sang about, and so I was just like living the lifestyle. And kind of does go well together. Like there's a certain level of social lubrication to alcohol that also helps with stage anxiety. And so, I also started to tell myself that I needed alcohol in order to do this work. So it kind of became like a part of my personality that I never saw it really as a problem, even though I knew I drank way more than anybody else, even the people I drank with. Um, I started in one of my day jobs, I was there alone. There's a sheet music store. Oh, I told you I might show you the kitty. Here she is. Oh, Katata Cat. So I started like taking a lunch break, and it was like just me. So I'd close the store and I'd walk up to the, liquor store on the corner, and I'd get a 6-pack of beer, and I'd come back and I'd like drink them because often there was nobody in the store for a while. And then I, at my next job, I would like go home and have a couple of heavy duty IPAs and smoke some weed on my lunch break, and I'd come back and, always, I got really used to like always hiding that I was not quite sober. Um, Later on, after I started doing music as my only career and not having a day job, I remember so many times I'd be playing for this morning choral class, and I'd play the first hour, and then we'd have a little like 10-minute break. And the whole first hour, I was thinking about how on the 10-minute break, I could go to the gas station and I could get a tall boy and drink it in the bathroom. And then I would feel better for the next hour. Buying like 2 little one-shot whiskey bottles on the way to my, church gig that I had to be at 7 in the morning, like in order to make myself feel better through the church gig, I would just down those in the bathroom, and I feel like, man, I wish I got 3. Um, you know, uh, I lived in Ventura for a little while, which is about a half hour, 45 minutes south of Santa Barbara. I was thinking about trying to get some music work in LA. I ended up just getting more work in Santa Barbara. And I told myself, well, it's okay. I'll commute up in the morning and I don't have as early a start as rush hour. So it's a pretty easy drive up. And I'll stay there all day. I'll buy some lunch. Maybe I'll go visit my mom and do all my evening stuff. And then I'll drive back. And at that point, it's after rush hour. And instead, every time I got done and I had lunch break, I'd drive back home and I'd drink a couple IPAs, and then I'd wait until I felt like it was okay to drive back. Usually it probably wasn't exactly, like I felt comfortable, but I definitely didn't want to get pulled over. And I just got used to that, like eventually I had a whole little system where I always had, like, for a while it was a little glass bottle of whiskey that I would refill, and I would keep it in the back of my car, and I would drive to wherever I had to rehearse, and then I would drink it, rehearse, and then by that point I felt comfortable driving back home. I would go, working with the musical, musical theater students at the high school. I would do the same thing, like on a school campus in the middle of the day. I would take my break and I would go and down some whiskey. Later, it was white wine was my thing. For a reason, not because I really liked it, but it was a little easier not to go too far. I felt like it didn't, have as much of a smell impact. It was just purely medicine. I wasn't drinking it because I enjoyed it. It was the cheapest, you know, reasonably drinkable white wine I could find in big bottles. And I still just saw it as like, this is some necessary medicine to do the thing that I'm doing. And, you know, I would make that joke like, oh, I'm not an alcoholic. Alcoholics go to meetings. I'm a drunk, you know, like I didn't think of it as a problem still, even like knowing that the people I made that joke about were like, yeah, Ben is totally, you know. Like the people I lived with were partiers, you know, they would have parties where like they were doing whippets and cocaine and, you know, drinking. And yet I still like stood out as the drunk, even though I didn't do those other things. You know, I smoked weed and I drank. I hated cocaine the 2 times I tried it, luckily. Um, but I would like wake up at 3:30 in the morning and just get up and go get a beer. You know, like didn't matter if I was awake, I should probably just grab a beer, you know. And eventually I remember one of the people who sang in one of the choirs that I worked for, uh, they had like a little meeting with me, and someone had smelled it on me, you know, at one of the concerts. And they were more, you know, they weren't firing me. That was, you know, it's a lucky thing about being in a somewhat small community and, you know, having some, you know, specialized skill to your work. You're less likely to get fired for this sort of thing, you know, whereas somebody else, they smell alcohol on you at work, you're like, yeah, you're out of here. So, you know, I was lucky to escape any consequences from that, but it did make me realize like, hey, that's right, you know, people do notice, you know, I'm not like being that under the radar. And at that point I finally started to think like, you know, maybe I should consider something. And I remember deciding that what I would do is I would talk to my doctor. I had never really seriously considered AA because I had always just heard that it was like a Christian organization, you know, like that, you know, that was all I really knew about it. It was some sort of Christian program that worked for people. But yeah, that kind of turned me off. My doctor, I told him, you know, I probably told him about half of the actual amount I drank, and he was pretty freaked out by that. Um, and he immediately said that, you know, you need to go to AA, you need to get on something to get you through the withdrawals, and you need to go to a therapist. And he explained that, you know, he saw AA as a spiritual, not a religious program, is the way he said it, and that he had had patients. He actually had an AA chip on his little desk, I noticed, but it was somebody, it was one of his patients who he had helped, who had recovered and had given him the chip in some sort of, you know, meaningful thank you. So I had thought that he had been in recovery at first, but then later found out that that was his experience with AA, was, you know, getting people toward it. So I got on the little clonazepam, Klonopin, and I started going to an early morning AA meeting that was out at the harbor, and it was kind of like a not very religious one. I really sort of liked it, and I got pretty serious about it. I was reading all the literature, and I was kind of having a little trouble feeling like I fit in. I went to a couple speaker meetings around town and started to feel like, man, you know, these people like had real problems, you know, like maybe I'm not one of them. I don't know, you know, like I just felt like I wanted to quit, you know, it didn't like ruin my life, you know. Although somebody at one point said something that I liked, which was like, you know, I never lost like my wife and kids or house, you know, but then again, I was drinking too much to ever have any of those things. So um, I don't know if I would have had I not been drinking anyway. But I got serious enough about it until the point when I started to feel like I didn't want to be going to these early morning meetings anymore. It wasn't, I wasn't really necessarily feeling like I didn't need them, but I was feeling like, maybe I could go to less of them. And then it became less. And eventually I wasn't really going to them. And I I did the same sort of thing that I had done the first, way back. I had tried to quit a year earlier, and I'd gone some months just on my own. And I decided I had proved I wasn't an alcoholic because I had gone some months, and I started again. This time I did a similar thing, like I had gone even longer. And then something happened. It was like I went to a party with my friends, and I brought the gal that I was dating, and some comment that she made kind of irritated me. And they were drinking like mimosas. It was like a daytime 1st of January, New Year's party. And I just decided I would have one. And then I ended up having a few, and immediately was right back to my old habits. It took no time. And I kind of justified it that I was gonna like control it, and that was gonna be fine, and it took no time for it to be not controlled at all anymore. So I think I only went about a month before I decided I had to quit again. And at this point, I decided I would start going to the meeting that I had only hit once or twice. That was like a Wednesday evening, um, secular meeting in Santa Barbara. That it was where I met Jeff from this meeting. I don't know if he's here right now. He and another guy kept this meeting open, and I'll always be grateful to Jeff for being one of the people who, kept showing up, even though sometimes it was only him and one other person. Sometimes it was four of us, sometimes it was eight. It was a pretty big meeting for that one. And it was nice, like when you've only got four people in the room and you've got an hour, you have to talk for a while. It's not like one of those like, oh, I wonder if I'm going to speak tonight for 2 minutes. It's like, okay, I got to really fill some time. And it also showed me that there was a way that the steps didn't have to include a bunch of Jesus-y stuff. And there was literature that was written specifically for this type of meeting. I don't know if Jeffrey Munn's book had come out yet, but I remember the One Big Tent book was a really cool one to start to check out. But that was only once a week. And it was still a little tough for me to think about never drinking again. Like that still wasn't, I was telling myself that that was how I felt, but it still wasn't really fully sunk in. I kept dating the same gal who she's still a friend of mine. She's been really supportive of me in recovery. And she was at the time. She never drank the whole time we were together, even though I didn't ask her not to do that. But there are some people who just can take it or leave it. Yeah, amazingly. It wasn't any big deal for her. So it wasn't like the only time that she ever felt it was when she was like somewhere with her family and doing holiday stuff. And she still didn't, even though I wasn't there with her, but she would tell me like, yeah, I can feel that, like when you really kind of, miss it because that was your way of getting through something. At some point, sadly, it was on her birthday. We went out somewhere, and there was a place that I had really, it was a nice restaurant that had really interesting cocktails. And I decided that, again, it had been long enough that I could like, have one or two. And I had, I don't know exactly how many, but I didn't get like drunk, but I got annoying to her. And she explained that to me later, and we broke up, sadly, on her birthday. It wasn't a hugely emotional situation. It was just kind of a like, she wasn't having it. And And at that point, I was kind of like wanting to like leave everything that was keeping me from being able to drink anyway. So I kind of like felt like it was a relief, like it didn't feel like as bad a thing as, in hindsight, that's a relationship I shouldn't have ruined. Um, but it's still a friendship that I'm grateful to have. But it it's in hindsight still makes me sad to remember that relationship, and to realize how easy it is um to hurt somebody by going back to selfishly doing the things that you shouldn't. So then the pandemic hit, and I I had been so okay. When we broke up, this was my third going back to drinking. And I learned, after this, that every time you relapse, it's a lot harder to stop again. Like the withdrawals get way worse. The first time I quit, after drinking for decades, I just stopped on my own. I think I drank a lot of soda and smoked a lot of cigarettes. The second time, my doctor gave me the couple weeks worth of the Klonopin. The third time I did the same thing. I went back to the doctor. But then it wasn't all that long before I started, I stopped, and then I started again. And at that point, the pandemic had hit, and I was like embarrassed to go back to my doctor and again tell him that I was drinking again. And so I decided maybe I would try quitting on my own. And I had heard about this kratom stuff that's like an opioid family thing that some people have used to quit opioids, and also some people have used to quit alcohol. Um, and I decided maybe I would try that as a route to quitting. So I got some of that, and I started drinking little, like half shots of alcohol with some of this kratom mixed in, to be like, I'm gonna both taper and use this kratom stuff in this, like, my own creative method of getting through withdrawal. And I just ended up developing a habit of mixing kratom with whiskey and having that as my horrible tasting drink that I drank for a while. And it was actually like a really, that's the point in my life that, like I look back, and that should have been like the rock bottom in the movie, where I'm like drinking this nasty green chalky shit that's horrible, and is like honestly getting, developing, adding another addictive thing into my life in order to like pretend I'm trying to quit the one that I'm not quitting. Um, and and so I started going to the online version of that Wednesday night meeting. That was my first online meeting, but it didn't really work for me. I was like, these online meetings, I'm not feeling connected to it. And it was only once a week. But I finally stopped for a little while during the pandemic, because I realized that I had way too much time on my hands, and it was going to be worse than it had ever been. I was just going to be drunk all the time. My friends who didn't drink as much as me were drinking more, so I knew that it was going to be a bad situation for me. And then I decided I would take some weed gummies, just to give myself something to look forward to. Each night I would take like one little weed gummy and maybe watch a movie, and then it was like two, and then I was like, maybe I should get the stronger ones. And it wasn't long before I got whiskey. It taught me that the sort of California sober thing doesn't work for me. So if I'm getting high, it's gonna progress. I'm gonna be like, next time maybe more. um, so that's a nice thing to realize. So then I went back to my doctor again. I got uh, medicine again to get through withdrawal, and I decided to really, try out the online meetings again. And I went to the Wednesday one again, and at this point, all of a sudden, the whole thing had blossomed into a ton of online secular meetings. And this one was in its early stages. And I remember Jeff and I both separately found this meeting, and I think he told me about it, and I was like, yeah, I went a couple times, and some nights it was interesting, and some nights it was weird. Every night we read the Beyond Belief book, and it was a pretty small meeting, and there was some drama, and some people ended up leaving. It was kind of like a chaotic meeting at the time. But we really both liked that it was like a late night every night meeting. That was like the stability that we didn't have, going to like one on Wednesday at one time and liked another one on Friday at another time and trying them out. Like the stability was a really good thing. So basically finding this group was one of the things that allowed me to find like that rock that helped me actually realize that I could find a community that could help me actually stay sober, and not just a group that helped me through a day at a time, but a group that actually, you know, made me see a light at the end of the tunnel, like a situation where I could actually enjoy life sober without thinking that I was missing something. And now, like I was saying, working at my mom's house for 12 hours, until 5 in the morning to like, try to figure out what things I can save before the, wrecking crew comes in. That would have been something that I really felt like I needed to drink through at most points in my life. And all I saw it as is, how much worse it would have been. Um, I went to New York the week before Christmas, and it was such a better trip than the vacations I took over the last decade, to different places. And I went to New York a previous time, and I remember I always had a bottle of whiskey in my pocket. And I was like bringing alcohol home, like the whole trip was just me finding ways to get drunk around what my girlfriend wanted to do, and sort of like halfway enjoying everything because I was halfway drunk. Like it basically turned into like I thought that was what was fun about it. I went to New Orleans and it was even worse, man. Like the hangover after that trip was terrible. But in my mind, that was like what was great. I had this awesome drunken experience. But like looking back on it, I could have done so many more fun things. I could have um, enjoyed myself a lot more if that wasn't like the sort of anchor weighing me down. So I'm looking forward to doing more traveling now in that way, in a way that's just I'm so much more optimistic about. Like I credit this group with a lot of it, but also I'm I'm seeing it in a different way now. That like there, I think it took me a while of sort of like having trouble enjoying things without alcohol, of course, because I spent so much time with alcohol being like a part of everything. And there's a huge amount of just like joy that alcohol brought me. That's of course why I went to it every night. That's of course why I like couldn't do without it, even for short periods, is because no matter what was going on, drinking would make me feel awesome. Um, but it made everything else the normal things about my life, it made just like blah, like there was nothing good in my life except for those moments when I was able to get drunk enough and hopefully not be too hungover to enjoy the next day. Of course, I was a pretty highly developed hair of the dog drinker. I knew exactly what I needed to drink in the morning to get myself through, because I gotta like go play the piano in church, and I don't really want to throw up on the keys in front of the church people. So I better be able to control that nausea. You know, um, it's yeah, amazing to me. It really, it was sad to me for a while that I kind of did leave most of my friends behind that I used to have. Um, because like I said, I made all my friends based on them being people I could get high with, and so like even the friends that weren't really doing that anymore, they're still friends that I knew for that reason, like it feels sad to be like, oh man, the relationships that I developed throughout my adult life, like kind of leaving them behind. But it's not something that I think everybody has to do. But for me, the way I developed my relationships, it was a healthy thing, and is a healthy thing. And the friendships that I've made in here are real, like, and so much healthier for me than the the drinking buddies I used to have, even the very good drinking buddies. So yeah, at this point, I can't imagine going through the last month where both of my brothers are suing each other. They'll probably never speak to each other again on any friendly terms, without lawyers present. My mom has moved to senior housing, which is partly against her wishes, but at this point, it's kind of necessary for her safety. And that kind of family drama that would have driven me into drinking more, it would have made it really rough for my mother, because I'm kind of the person that can help her. My younger brother is out of the picture in terms of doing anything for her, and my older brother doesn't live here but is in control of everything, power of attorney stuff, and you know selling the house, and basically not really caring about what in the house gets thrown out, like photographs, memories. Like, I guess he's not a sentimental guy or something. um and yeah, if I was depressed and drinking a lot over it, I probably would allow a lot of stuff to get thrown out that I would really regret. And my mom's transition, when people talk to her on the phone, the amount of visitors she's had is directly proportional to how happy she is there. If somebody hasn't visited her in a little while, she gets more and more depressed. She likes the people there. They love her cat. They love her, but she's got a consistent negative concept in her mind about senior living, partly because of a horrible skilled nursing experience in her a couple years back. So it's really hard to like keep her optimistic about her new situation. Um, and it requires me being able to go to work for the morning and then take some time to visit her, have lunch with her, something like that. And, if I had to go home and pound some IPAs, I wouldn't be able to do that. She would have the rare visit here and there. So I'm just so glad that this last month and these last couple months, I'm able to be present and help her through this. So that's my story up till now. And I'm super grateful to this group. I'm really grateful to be sober, and glad to speak tonight.